On this week's Back of the Grid, a pretty uneventful Japanese Grand Prix, but a few interesting things to pick out nonetheless, and a look ahead to Bahrain. So let's go. Hello everyone, welcome to Back of the Grid. We're laughing because Tom has just deafened me with the theme music. I'm Chris, that indeed is Tom.
Hi. Chris has no ears left.
No, it's just going to be me talking and Tom listening, I guess. Yes, we're here to talk about the Japanese Grand Prix, which was not the best, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because, yeah, in terms of on-track action and stuff, wasn't really that interesting a race. I think the thing that summed it up best overall was the three podium finishers sat in the cool-down room, and the highlights were the start from multiple different onboard angles, then the incident in the end, the pit exit between Norris and Verstappen, and then the end of the race. And I think it was Oscar who turned around to the other two and went, "Wait, that was it?
That was all the things that happened?
That's all that happened?" And it kind of like, yeah, it was. I mean, the most exciting bit was genuinely Q3, I think. Of the whole weekend, Q3 was the most exciting bit.
Yeah, I mean, qualifying was phenomenal. And, like, sadly, I think Suzuka's up there with the best racetracks in the world. But I think with the kind of this era of Formula One, it doesn't really produce great races unless there's something like some rain to mix things up a bit.
Yeah.
I think it was made worse this time by the fact that they resurfaced a lot of it. So you had a very high grip but low deg surface. So everyone one-stopped very easily. I mean, if you look at the results page, literally the only change from the starting grid to the end of the race in the top 10 was Hamilton and Hadjar swap places. Everybody else in the top 10 started where they finished.
Yeah. I've not looked into this far enough. You might be able to answer this on the spot, you might not. But are the compounds that they took to Japan this year the same as we have in previous years, or have they changed them because of the resurfacing?
I don't know for certain, but based on what I've read, my suspicion is they did take the same ones and didn't take the new surface into account, I think is what's happened there.
Well, what I thought it might have been is that after what happened in China, they potentially took something slightly harder than usual in order to compensate for a new surface, thinking it might have the same effect, but
no, I think
that might not be the case.
They're normally set way in advance, so I think it's just as it is. But yeah, still quite a few things of interest to talk about. I mean, the race was sort of on Saturday, as you already alluded to. Like, that Q3 session was, as it proved, super important, and man, what a lap from Max to pole position. Yeah. Like, that came out of nowhere. Like, the whole weekend, it looked like Russell was going to be the one sort of closest to taking the fight to the McLarens. And, yeah, Verstappen just did what Verstappen does, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, oversimplifying it, but he made that difference literally in the braking zone to the final chicane.
Yeah,
there's some really good, like, side by side onboard analysis, and there's bits where it kind of ebbs and flows. Like, for example, the McLaren is faster through sector 1. There's then a bit where Max sort of pulls it back by being pretty late on the brakes into the Degners.
And into the hairpin, he made a chunk
and
of
then
time
into the
well.
hairpin as well. And then Lando gets a better exit out of the spoon curve, I think, onto the back straight. So it's like it's going back and forth, but we're talking like literal fractions of a second, like small amounts. This is going back and forth. And then the braking into the final chicane, I think I've seen that Max braked roughly around 25 metres further into the corner than Lando did. And
that's huge in
that
Formula One terms.
Yeah, in the terms of these cars and the speeds they're doing and the distances that they're already pretty close to apexes before they start
Yeah.
braking. 25 meters is a pretty big old chunk. And then Oliver Bearman setting the trend of hug the wall for the iRacing line, as he
Yeah.
put it. That was something that everyone started doing once he had a decent couple of lap times from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like Max just doing Max things is not. I think Fernando Alonso probably put it best, which is like he said, he's probably the only person on the grid right now that can get that much extra out of a car when it needs it. Like, there's definitely people who can outperform the car on the grid and do better than maybe what a car should be capable of because of their ability. But I think he's probably right in saying that Max is like the outright best at that right now by a long way.
Yeah, phenomenal. I mean, people asked him afterwards if he thinks that was his best ever qualifying lap, and he said it may well be. And yeah, I mean, it must be. He's had a lot of pole positions a lot of the time in a very fast car to do what he did in that car, which, I mean, they were changing the setup through the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And yeah, just found something to work for him, and he just gave it everything basically. Like, he left nothing out there. Super impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
In the race, I mean, the McLaren probably was the fastest car over race distance. I don't think there's much doubt about that. They just weren't really able to do anything with it. The closest, obviously, anything came changing was during the pit stops. Interestingly, so I don't know if you've seen before, but Red Bull, two of their pit crew are twins.
No, I've not noticed that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think it's their dad fell ill, so both of them went back home.
Right.
So they were actually using two kind of second string pit crew during the weekend, which McLaren probably knew, and so were probably expecting Red Bull to maybe have a slightly slower than normal pit stop, which is quite kind of an interesting, because Piastri was given the first pit stop, and then Norris followed Verstappen in, which on the face of it feels kind of like if you can't overtake the guy in front of you on track, you need to try to do something strategically different. Maybe McLaren were expecting a slow pit stop from Red Bull and thought that was their best shot of getting ahead, and it nearly worked. They got to the end of the pit lane side by side. I'd have liked to have seen them maybe try something. Like, to not bring Norris in first seems strange to me.
Yeah, to try and get the undercut.
Yeah.
That's generally what you do. I mean, just trying to think when the stops were. They were lap. I think they probably shot themselves in the foot by pitting Piastri first in a way, because obviously he pitted, and then to cancel out any undercut he might have got, Verstappen went in, and it forced Norris to have to react at the same time to avoid Norris being undercut by Verstappen, and like it was just a knock-on effect. Whereas maybe things have panned out slightly differently if Norris had have gone first and it was Piastri that was going sort of head-to-head in the pit lane with Verstappen, but I don't think there was enough in it to actually make that much of a difference. I mean, Piastri doesn't necessarily close a gap or leapfrog either of them from pitting a lap earlier, so I don't think there was too much in it. Generally, I don't think it's made that much difference. I think the bigger thing for them is maybe not doing more with swapping the cars later, but I'm guessing we'll get to that.
Yeah, I mean, looking down the top 10, the only change, as I said, was Hamilton overtaking Hadjar. There were lots of different pit stop points, and Hamilton did the alternate strategy, and ultimately it didn't really make a difference. Like no one seemed to undercut or overcut anyone. So it would have been nice to see McLaren try something a bit positive, but ultimately I don't think it would have made a difference. What about the pit exit thing? It went down as no investigation needed.
I think that's about right. So I think on other circuits with narrower pit lanes, McLaren are dangerously close to an unsafe release, I would probably say.
Absolutely.
Going and releasing a car not directly into the side of another car, but on those pit lanes like Monaco and places like that, they're a lot tighter, and you've not got that opportunity to run side by side in the fast lane. That release is possibly an unsafe release. And at no point as they get to the actual pit limiter line where they can release the pit limiter and exit onto the circuit, it's not until after that when Lando really punches it that he's ever properly fully alongside Max, and at which point he's in the grass anyway. So
Exactly.
I mean, I think yes, Max could have been a little bit more lenient with the space he left, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have to.
No,
You shouldn't be racing in the pits. You shouldn't be realistically side by side in the pits. It's on Lando to identify, I've come out alongside, well, slightly behind the car I'm racing, and I need to slot him behind him. That's just on Lando to do that. There's no way Max is ever going to give up that inside line going down into turn one, and he shouldn't have to. I think this is why McLaren didn't push it too hard as well, because of everything that I've just pointed out there in terms of some place that would be deemed an unsafe release.
Exactly.
Blah blah blah. That's exactly why they've not pushed it. They've raised it and been told no chance, don't push your luck, guys, and they've just left it, which I think is fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think they wanted to draw extra attention to it, to be honest, because as you say, like Max is already going down the pit lane as it's on Lando to join in front or behind of him safely, and he obviously couldn't do it in front because he wasn't out quick enough. So I don't think it was. I think the way it shook out was fine, honestly. I think Lando was pushing his luck.
I mean, he said that himself after the race, to be fair. Like, in a lot of the post-race interviews, he was kind of a little bit laughy-jokey about it, in the sense of, well, if you don't ask, you don't get, was kind of the attitude he was saying. Like, he basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he was essentially saying, I knew I probably wouldn't get anything out of it, but you've got to raise these things and see, because if they do decide that there's a rule broken and you fall lucky, you get something out of it. But I think he always knew he was pushing his luck by trying to call it out at the time.
Yeah. What about later in the race where Piastri was kind of nudging the team that he had more pace, and kind of, I don't think he ever outright suggested it, but the implication was, let me have a go at Max because I've got more pace here.
Yeah, so I personally am of the opinion that they should have at least given it a go. Like, it was between 10 and 15 laps to go. Piastri was pretty close to Norris, like within DRS range, and Norris at the time was about 2 seconds off Verstappen, I want to say. And it was clear from just watching them that Piastri had that bit more pace that he was saying he did. I think the radio message at the time was, this is Lando's true pace, or something like that. Like, basically saying, he's going as fast as he can. Lando did then manage to push a little bit and close the gap to Max a little to kind of justify staying in front, I guess. But Piastri still looked quicker, and I think that in realistic terms, like, no matter how early it is in the season, if there's a chance for McLaren to win the race and finish 1-3, or better yet 1-2, they need to take that, because... So I've looked at this from a couple of different angles, and I think when you look at the drivers' standings, Norris is currently top of it by a single point.
Yeah.
And I think that to some degree, McLaren have possibly looked at that and said, we don't want to risk Piastri not being able to get past Verstappen and then losing the actual title lead to Verstappen because of it. But in reality, if that was the ultimate motive, you do the classic, we'll switch positions, and if with 1 to 2 laps to go, he's not been able to make the move work, then we swap back. And that, I think generally that would work. Like, we've seen them make that work before. I get that Norris is leading in the championship at this point, but it's still so early, and they've missed an opportunity to take points off Verstappen and Red Bull, who bizarrely is their closest threat right now. Like, I know Mercedes and Ferrari keep peaks and troughs, but generally Verstappen is the one that's been consistently with them and performing. So I think that they need to at least try and take points off him when they can, because I mean, if he keeps performing like he is and he gets to the end of the season with even a sniff of the title, he has a potential to be a five-time back-to-back champion.
Yeah.
Which is just not a normal thing to have.
No.
And if he's in with a sniff of it, he is going to do everything in his power to make it happen.
Oh, yeah, you'd be mad
Taking
to
points
write
off him somewhere here is a perfect place to try and diminish that opportunity. Even if it means that, you end up with Piastri leapfrogging him a little bit and him actually leapfrogging Norris or coming close to Norris. But I think that in the grand scheme of things, if you set Piastri on him and they start fighting, Norris naturally comes with them. Like, Norris naturally comes and has the potential to then get in the fight to take second off Verstappen and bump him down to third. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunity in that regard with so many laps left. It was like I say, between 10 and 15 laps when this was realistically on the cards to do. If there were 3 or 4 laps left, I'd get the whole, let's just hold position and see if Lando can close in on him. But with 10 to 15 laps left, there was so much time that they potentially wasted of an opportunity to try and take some points off Max that I think they needed to do, regardless of if it's race 3 or race 23. It's something they need to think about.
I think the difficulty comes from this early in the season. You don't really know who your title rivals are going to be. You can kind of guess based on current performance, but we know how things can change over a season. Like this early last season, none of us really thought that Lando Norris was going to be a title contender, and in the second half of the season he made himself one. So it's difficult from McLaren's point of view to ask Lando to let Piastri through, because okay, if he doesn't get past Verstappen, we'll let him back through. But what if he does get by and Lando has not got enough time to get in the fight as well? Lando had already been trying to get past Verstappen for most of the race at that point. Suddenly, through a team decision, you've dropped one of your drivers 2 places behind what might end up being their title rival. And I think McLaren are sort of justifiably scared of rocking the boat or showing favouritism between their drivers. Like, I've seen some people saying this is a sign of them favouring Norris, and I don't think that's the case. I think they would have done the same thing regardless of which way around the drivers were. But like from the way they handled this race and some of the stuff they did in Australia, it kind of already feels like basically whoever comes out of turn 1 ahead is going to be the one that stays ahead, in the way McLaren are trying to run these races.
That's the classic, isn't it? That's the classic instigation of those rules, is whoever gets off the grid ahead gets the lead of the race between the teammates.
And if you're fighting each other for a world championship, your drivers aren't going to accept that. They're going to race each other. And if you're both racing Verstappen, you just end up taking points off each other and Verstappen runs away with it. So it's the curse of a very good, very evenly matched driver lineup, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
A nice problem to have, but
like I agree with you. I do see both sides of it. And I see exactly why they did hold position, because like I said in part of what I was saying, they're potentially looking at it as, if we hold as we are, even if Verstappen wins, we still lead the title race with Norris, is potentially how they've looked at it. Yeah. And I do see that side of it, but I also sort of think that they push themselves out of true contention towards the end of last season by being indecisive and not taking risks. And I think when they've got the car that they have, they're maybe looking at it as, well, generally speaking, our car is the best car. We could consistently finish on the podium with both cars week in, week out. Like that's probably how they're looking at it, as we don't need to be taking risks and pushing it too far. But like I say, if Max keeps performing like he does, then that Red Bull is unexpectedly going to stay part of that title fight, I think.
And I would say for the car the McLaren have got, for them to be leaving the third race with Lando only 1 point ahead of Max and Oscar 12 points behind him, that's pretty poor, actually, given the car McLaren have got. They should already have a bit of a cushion. They've not maximised these first 3 races, I don't think.
In contrast, though, you've got the Red Bull third in the constructors' standings on Max alone. It's all Max's 61 points. It's that whole story again of that car is somehow near the top of the constructors' standings based on Max's performance alone.
It's like the old screenshot from Alonso's Ferrari days of the 2 championships next to each other, and Alonso's leading the drivers and Ferrari are like 5th in the constructors.
Yeah.
Should we have a quick chat about Tsunoda in his debut Red Bull weekend?
Didn't get a chance to kind of cover this properly, did we? We talked about the speculation of it, but it sort of all happened pretty fast after we'd done the episode, right? I think.
No, we had another one.
We
did we talked about
it a little bit. Yeah.
The start of the season's just been. So these early starts for us, we're not.
I forget what we've done and what we've not done.
Yeah. It started pretty well for him. He was within a tenth of Max in FP1.
Yeah.
He went up to 0.3 in FP3. Even in Q1, I think he was fairly close, but Q2 just kind of fell apart for him, didn't it? I'm not sure if he was making mistakes or whether he just wasn't as comfortable with the car, but he wasn't really able to get a lap in. He ended up managing only 15th place out in Q2, half a second off Max in that session, and notably a place behind Lawson in the RB, the guy he replaced. He ends up finishing the race outside the points in 12th place. Time-wise, it was a pretty similar gap between him and Max as the gap between Lawson and Max in China. I don't think that tells the full story, though, to be honest. I think we saw how non-existent the racing was this weekend. Like, the number of overtakes, I've not seen the actual number, but it was minimal. Yeah. I do think on another track from that position, I think over the weekend Tsunoda showed the pace that he probably could have worked his way up and finished in the points. It doesn't excuse the fact that Q2 was a disaster and he should really have been getting through that session, but I don't think his performance was as bad as the finishing position makes it look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that somewhat. Like, he wasn't too far away from Max in Q1, but that's obviously a session where, he wasn't that far off Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, like all the guys that you'd expect them to be mixing it with. From a Q1 perspective, it was in and around them there. The difference is when it comes to Q2, Q3 and beyond, and they can all turn it up and get another half a second out of it, and then go into Q3 and get another half a second out of it. Like, I think this was a slight difference, is all those top-end drivers were leaving time on the table in Q1, and I think that was Tsunoda getting the absolute most out of it in Q1. It's one of those things that'll come, I think. Like, it's literally his first weekend in the car. I mean, we've seen them only give Lawson 2 weekends, but yeah, they definitely need to let him settle in it. It's slightly more promising than what we've seen from Lawson, even if only marginally.
It is.
He looks a little bit more comfortable, and you've seen those flashes of being able to get the pace out of it, whereas I think part of the problem with the Lawson situation was maybe that we didn't even see those moments where this could work out. It was just always felt like disaster, whereas at least with Yuki from Glimmers in free practice and then Q1, there were elements of, okay, he might be able to get some pace out of this and get a bit closer to Max than Lawson did.
It does sort of feel like, particularly with qualifying, like getting those extra few tenths out of a car that you need to find in Q2 and Q3, that's where, for other drivers, the car starts fighting back and they struggle with it, whereas Max is able to still find that extra time in the car. So I'm interested to see how the next few Saturdays go for Tsunoda, whether he can get a handle on that. And also just if he's able to perform better on race pace. Even if the qualifying's not there, maybe he will be more comfortable in race spec and be able to make up for it a bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because what's very clear, whether you look at Norris in the McLaren or Verstappen in the Red Bull, those were two extremely fast laps. I mean, record-setting laps at the times that they went in. Yet they were both so smooth, precise. They weren't. Neither of them were fighting the car. Like, literally, if you watch the onboards from both of them, it's almost millimeter perfect precision. Like,
so
don't get me wrong, there's a couple of moments, mainly for Norris, where he just fights a tiny bit of like oversteer or something like that, but it's minimal. And like those two laps, you can see why they're literally so close in time, because other than choosing a very, very slightly different braking point in some corners, they are just so smooth and so accurate. I mean, it's why they're the best in the world. It's why they get the seats that they do, and it's why they're in the position that they are. But I think when you can see how smooth they are with that, you see it from Schumacher. Schumacher was always so smooth in the Ferrari, whereas other people are like fighting the car, and that's when you're not necessarily as fast. Like, how Max is achieving what he's achieving in that car and not fighting it to get it out of it, I've got no idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that goes to show, and I haven't been and looked at Yuki's on boards, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him kind of chopping at the wheel a little bit and fighting it. And as we all know from everyone that's driven a Red Bull and what they say about it, that's when you start losing time in that car. Like, it's much less forgiving in those scenarios if you are chopping around at the wheel. And I think things like the McLaren, the Ferrari, the Mercedes are probably a little bit more forgiving in those scenarios if you are a little bit twitchy or direct.
Yeah. Yeah. As I say, I've got a level of confidence that Tsunoda's going to be able to start getting some results in. The glimmers were there.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'd agree with that.
Quick word on Ferrari and Mercedes, who were come qualifying and race were actually pretty similarly paced. In the end, it was a sort of a Mercedes sandwich with Leclerc ahead of Russell Antonelli and then Hamilton behind them. As I mentioned, he was the only one that actually gained a place in the top 10. He overtook Hadjar on track after he did the alternative strategy starting on the hards. Kimi Antonelli did a particularly impressive first stint. He took the mediums actually one lap further than Hamilton took his hards. Most people were taking the mediums like 19, 20, 21 laps. Antonelli 31 on them and was still putting in really good lap times. I think at any other track where any kind of overtaking, undercut, overcut worked, that might have worked out well for him. As it was, he ended up exactly where he started. But yeah, like an impressive stint all the same. Like, it's one thing for a young driver to come in and be fast, but to also be able to kind of handle tyres and manage the pace over a stint like that, it was, I thought, really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the majority of the rookies, we'll probably get to some of them, but I think they all had decent weekends other than Lawson, unfortunately. But
yeah, especially for a track, I think a lot of them probably won't have been to, actually, because feeder series tend not to go to Japan.
That and, well, yeah, I think ironically Lawson's probably the only one of those officially called a rookie that's actually raced here.
Yeah, I think he is.
The others won't have, but yeah, I think for Bearman, for and for
Hadjar.
Antonelli, Hadjar as well. Yeah. I was trying to think about Bortoletto and where Bortoletto was, but probably not the best example. But the other three, like being in the points and having decent results at a circuit like that, is definitely good going. Especially, I think Hadjar and Bearman stand out a little bit because of the cars that they're in. But I mean, as we keep seeing, the Racing Bulls looks fairly legit up there as being a potential best of the rest. And I bet I bet there's moments through this weekend where Yuki's been so torn between being promoted to the big team and losing out on what is looking like a half decent car this year for points. So,
like I think Tsunoda in the RB would have been around the same sort of place had you finished, honestly.
Yeah.
Just going back to Antonelli, little couple of fun stats. He became the youngest ever race leader during that race when he stayed out for that month-long stint. Yeah. And he's now also the youngest ever driver with a fastest lap because he finished the race with fastest lap. So a couple of records that he was able to take off Verstappen.
Yeah, they're probably like the only two he could have taken. Well, sorry. There's now not going to be many more, if any, that you can take from him in terms of youngest something or other. I think
I'm right in saying Bahrain is his last chance to take the youngest ever winner record off Max.
Oh, I thought I'd heard a bit of it being that this weekend was his last chance.
It could have been this one, actually. If he wasn't this one, it's the next race anyway.
Yeah.
Another interesting little thing from Ferrari. Hamilton said after the race that the team have found something on the car that's not been working properly for the first 3 races of the season. He didn't go into any details, but there's been something broken on that Ferrari that they're expecting to have fixed for next race. Not much detail there, but interesting to know all the same. You just mentioned RB and Hadjar. Really, really good weekend for Hadjar. 7th place in quali, which... as we say, he just lost that one place on track to Hamilton, but finished 8th for his first ever points in F1, which is, just super impressive. Like, really looked really comfortable, really fast. In fact, if you average out the gap between him and Hamilton over the full race distance, it only works out at Hadjar being a 10th and a half a lap slower than Hamilton, which is not bad going. Up against a multi-world champion in a Ferrari versus a rookie in a Minardi.
Yeah, it was definitely good going. And I think, despite all the issues he had going into quali, he had trouble with the belts in the car. I'll not be too crude about specifically what was happening. But he was very uncomfortable, let's say.
He certainly was.
Due to his centre belt through the end of free practice 3 and then into Q1. But I think they managed to get him out of the car between Q1 and Q2, and so he kind of scraped through Q1 into Q2. Then they managed to actually get it adjusted properly and sort him out, and then he was on it for the rest of the weekend after that. So
Lawson, pretty tough weekend. Qualified 13th. He actually took his opening set of mediums even longer than Antonelli. He did 33 laps on his first stint, but it didn't really work for him. He ended up dropping a couple of places, finished 17th. Yeah, well, I was kind of expecting the strategy to screw him anyway, but I was hoping to see him a little further up before it strategically went wrong. But we'll see how things play out for him.
Yeah,
at least he had a clean weekend like that.
I think for me it's a little bit like the Yuki situation where I take the exact result with a pinch of salt. Like, they've not gone majorly. Neither of them have gone majorly backwards, and neither of them have majorly struggled. I think that they've both not gotten the full potential out of the car when you compare it to the teammates, and that feels a bit obvious to say, but they've not major struggled and had major issues, I don't think. And when we look at the race and we say there's next to no overtakes, it's hard to then look at it and say, well, he didn't really go forward. Nobody really went forward. So,
no.
Yeah, it's not just a him problem, that one, I think, on this occasion.
Over at Williams, Albon managed to break his 3-race DNF streak at Suzuka to get another points finish, finishing 9th. It's actually his 3rd consecutive points finish, which is the first time he's done that at Williams, which is good to see. Sainz had a rough one. He was only 12th in qualifying and lost a couple of places. I've seen some sort of talk after the race that he's feeling a bit more comfortable in the car now, but Yeah, I was expecting Sainz to be a lot closer to Albon, and it's not quite worked out for him so far.
Yeah, interesting one, isn't it? He's not looked that comfortable in all of the first three races so far. Where that comes from, I don't know. I would definitely have expected him to start bedding in by now. I'm trying to remember if he felt like he was a bit of a slow starter when he first moved to Ferrari. If we
It's a good
saw
question,
him,
actually. Don't
'cause
remember that
I
far
feel like
back.
there was a little period where he had at least a bit of a lull, where he wasn't quite finishing where he ought to, but that wasn't necessarily always his fault. I mean, the car was on fire a lot in those scenarios I'm talking
Literally.
about. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think that that was all him if it was the case, but yeah, I think the benefit that Carlos has at least is time, like, and a proven track record of being able to win races and compete and so on. Like, he's got those things on his side, and I think Williams will be fairly patient with him,
Yeah, absolutely.
and let him bed in. Yeah, angry side to Albon though on the other side of the garage through the race.
Yeah.
It sounded like both him and Max. These were the two I audibly heard anyway. Both had issues with not being happy with the upshifts through the early stage of the race. Max reporting it at one point, I think, and just saying that they needed to look at it, and they seemed to get it sorted. But yeah, Albon was very angry about it. Like a lot of bleeped
Yeah,
comms.
which surprising from him. Don't normally hear much of that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Ollie Bearman, we already briefly mentioned. More points for him. Again, really impressive in qualifying and held up for points, especially when you compare him to his teammate Ocon, who qualified down in 18th. He was out in Q1. And I think he finished around there as well, didn't he? Yeah, finished 18th. Basically, I'm going to assume everybody finished where they qualified at this point.
You might as well.
Yeah, really good weekend for Bahrain. He's just quietly been doing a very good job this season. Obviously, Australia was a bit of a nightmare for everybody, but yeah, he's looking really good.
Yeah. I'm liking him so far, and he's been a young guy on the grid. He's sort of still fairly chilled out and just enjoying his time. So
Yeah.
it's quite fun to watch, just enjoying it, I guess, to some degree. Like in the interviews and stuff, you can see he's just taking it all in and embracing it and enjoying the time that he's lucky enough to be here. So I think that's probably playing a big part into it. He looks relaxed, he looks comfortable, and he looks like he fits in, which is probably going some way to this.
Yeah.
And I think Kimi Antonelli's the same in some regards. Like he seems to fit into Mercedes pretty well, and he looks pretty relaxed in the team and so on. So I think that's probably a factor why he's been doing pretty decent with the Mercs, at least as we'd expect him to, and not had any major struggles. And to be fair, after that tough first weekend, I'd say Hadjar falls into that bracket a little bit as well when we've talked about him. Like I think all three of them are starting to look a bit more relaxed and a bit more comfortable, apart from seatbelt issues.
Yeah, I mean, I spent pre-season telling everyone to keep an eye on Bortoletto. That I thought he was going to be the standout rookie, and I'm being proven very wrong so far. Although
Yeah,
I think
I mean-
a lot of that's probably to do with the horrific car that he's in.
I think what'd be interesting is if by the end of the season we truly, I mean, we'll not forget what happened with Hadjar in Australia, but I think he's on a trajectory at the minute to do so much over the season that if he carries on the way that he is right now, people will have, for all intents and purposes, kind of forgotten about what happened in Australia when when there was this big like, is he really going to be good enough? Like even rookies shouldn't be making mistakes. Like there's a lot of that kind of instantly negative vibe around him. But I think if he keeps doing what he's done this weekend and solid qualifying sessions and so on, I think Hadjar could be one of those that's in contention for Rookie of the Year by the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Bearman probably closely following him, would be my guess.
To round out the rookies, we'll talk about Jack Doohan, who had a monster crash in practice.
Yes, scary almost.
Yeah, seemingly because he his DRS was still open when he turned into turn one. So it's interesting because for people who are not quite so into the technical stuff as we are, there's essentially three different ways to close the DRS flap. One is to press the DRS button again. The other is to hit the brakes. And then also, if you lift off the throttle with a big enough lift, that will also close the DRS. Now, normally at the end of a DRS zone is a corner that you hit the brakes for and it closes. But turn one at Suzuka, you sort of go in, if not flat, without braking, and you kind of brake on the way into turn two. From some analysis I've seen, it looked like on previous laps that Doohan had been doing, he'd been relying on a very light tap of the brakes to close DRS just before he turned in. And it seems like on the lap he had the crash, that tap of the brakes wasn't enough to register and close the DRS flap. Now, the thing is, if you then go and watch Max Verstappen's on board, he was just pressing the DRS button to make sure it was closed. And if a four-time world champion's doing it that way, as a rookie, you probably want to be following suit.
I mean, not to speak above my station, but I'm pretty sure that's how I'd do it as well.
Yeah,
like,
it's just not a thing that you want to be taking. I know I'm not a
professional driver or anything, but I'm pretty sure that whether it's on the F1 game or if I was there in real life, my option would be press the button that closes it.
Absolutely not worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, though, if you're trying to carry as much speed as you can into turn one and ride it through into turn two, like what you were saying, you don't really want to be lifting up. Well, you want to be lifting to some degree, but you don't want to be braking. Like, it just feels like it's going to upset the balance of the car. And you're gonna potentially like throw yourself into oversteer anyway, because if you're tapping the brakes in order to shut the DRS, you're shifting all the way to that car forwards and then turning in and then coming off the brakes. For me, like, everything that I've ever been taught about how to drive a car quickly, that contradicts. Like, you're not supposed to be tapping your brakes and shifting the weight back and forwards of the car, and it feels like his method for closing the DRS would have done exactly that. Like, so why not just push the button? It just feels like it's definitely a rookie mistake for sure, but it feels very much like one that so many people, even at an armchair level like us, would be like, why are you doing it that way? Like, what? Why is he chosen to do it that way?
Because he's clearly trying to like tap it enough to register, but not to actually be applying the brakes, basically.
Well, yeah, I guess, maybe.
But you would hope, like, I don't know what Gasly was doing in the other car, but at that point you would hope there would be someone within the team, an engineer, to say, probably not the best approach, just press the button to be safe. So as much as it was ultimately, it seems like it was a mistake on Doohan's part. I think it's partially a failure on Alpine's part to not have been kind of coaching him through how to approach a corner like that with DRS and the way that works. It's also worth pointing out that Doohan didn't take part in FP1 because he was replaced by Hirakawa, Japanese driver in his home weekend getting a FP1 thing. However, because of a quirk of the way the rookie drivers in free practice rule works, you have to have each of your drivers replaced twice per season in FP1 by a young driver. But because a young driver is classed as someone who's not started more than, I think, 3 Grand Prix, Doohan has already counted as the young driver by entering the first 2 races this season. So having Hirakawa in his car didn't go to that allocation. So why, as Alpine, are you putting him in Doohan's car and not in Gasly's car? Yeah. It just makes no sense. You're taking a practice session away from a rookie driver who I don't think will ever have raced there before, versus your other driver who's been, Gasly's, 8 years into his career now? I can't remember how long Gasly's been around.
Long enough.
Yeah, it's just a bizarre decision. And again, as much as it was ultimately a mistake that he made as a driver, not giving him first practice and then having him go into practice 2 trying to play catch up, he's not going to create an environment where a rookie is going to necessarily do all these things perfectly. And yeah, very strange the way they're handling him.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense, does it? It's definitely not been done in order to achieve the numbers that are required for the rookie sessions. Let's put it that way. It's been done, if anything, because of a Japanese driver being in the car in front of Japanese fans.
Yeah,
when it's at the compromise of a rookie that needs the track time, I just don't understand why. Like, you know, when you've got a rookie in your car that already qualifies for that and doesn't need to be replaced at any point during the season, you've only got to run that second rookie twice in your other driver's car. I mean, if you're in a weird situation where you've got a rookie in both cars, I mean, RB don't quite count for that, I suppose, the racing bulls, but because Lawson will have done enough races. But if they were actually both true rookies, then you wouldn't have to run anybody in the car other than your drivers for the whole sessions.
I mean, Clarence in the chat makes the point that Alpine probably trust Gasly a lot more than Doohan to work on the setup of the car for the weekend, which is a fair point.
Yeah, that's fair, but at that point you replace neither of them then.
Exactly.
Because you don't need to replace Doohan. So...
yeah, very odd. I mean, he did take part in the race. I don't know if you saw the onboard footage of Doohan getting out of the car after the race.
Not from onboard. I've only seen it from external cameras around the circuit.
Basically, Ocon and one of the mechanics had to help him out of the car. And as he was walking away, he was like holding onto his ribs and limping slightly. So he was clearly still really hurting from that crash.
Yeah, I think the sensors went off at something like 50G, did they?
Yeah.
Like, that's huge.
It was one of the crashes where they don't let the driver get out of the car until the medical crew have arrived. It was big enough for that to come into effect. And... you know, obviously I don't doubt for a second that he passed all of the medical tests necessary to take part. F1 take that very seriously. But if you've got a guy who's clearly in pain, still entering a race, because he doesn't know when it's going to be his last race, it would not surprise me if Flavio now goes ahead and uses this as an excuse to drop him and put Colapinto in the car. It's a matter of time, you know, especially if he's hurt and we're going into... It's a triple header now, isn't it? We've got 2 more races in the next 2 weekends.
We've got Bahrain this weekend and then whatever's next after that, I've genuinely forgotten right now. But
Saudi Arabia, I think?
Yeah, we've got the 3 back-to-back from Japan. So it's... Yeah. I mean, the whole rumour at the start of the season was that he had a 5-race deal, right? And that he didn't have a contract any longer than 5 races.
Yeah.
I don't think he will get a renewal of that deal if that is the case. Because I think by Saudi Arabia, before going to Miami, they potentially switch them.
I honestly think that decision had already been made before the season even started. And now with this crash, they've got a nice excuse to attach to it.
Shame.
Yeah, I mean, we've criticised Red Bull's handling of drivers a lot at the beginning of this year, but the way
Alpine are a close second, I would say.
They're a very close second.
With the whole Piastri scenario, with McLaren, with this thing that's going on right now, they're not too far behind Red Bull in terms of how they deal with the drivers. So.
It's a real shame because Doohan's stuck with Alpine for years as a young driver and as a reserve driver, and to finally get his shot and them to just... basically already have someone they're more interested in standing next to me in the garage it's just a bit grim. Yeah,
Unfortunately so.
And then on top of all of that, we mentioned Hirakawa, who was in the Alpine in Doohan's car for FP1. Pretty much straight after, it was announced that Hirakawa is now leaving Alpine and he's joining Haas as their reserve driver.
That's like Hirakawa just basically saying, I have not signed any contract with Haas, with Alpine, sorry. He's doing the whole Piastri thing. I have not announced this. I will not be driving for them, despite
Yeah,
being
it
in
really
FP1.
is. It's bizarre. Like, because I mean, Hirakawa has also done at least one FP1 for McLaren in the past as well. He's like,
Yeah.
he's playing like Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all with FP1 sessions.
Got to drive them all. He's going to
I
try
mean,
and get every car.
Haas at least makes sense for him. Like, he is a Toyota driver. Haas have a partnership with Toyota. It makes sense for him to be there. He's a really interesting driver to be in this kind of like reserve driver position, because you tend to think of that as people just coming out of their rookie career. Ryo Hirakawa's 31. He's a platinum grade driver, drivers in World Endurance Championship. He's World Endurance Champion, in fact, I think, for a couple of times.
Should be.
He's won Le Mans once. He's got an amazing career as a sports car driver, but he's also kind of knocking around as an F1 reserve driver as well. Very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, odd all the same. And there's not much else from that race to talk about. I'm amazed we've done as long as we have, actually. Should we do some awards before we move on to Bahrain?
Yeah.
Driver of the day.
Driver of the day is hard because none of them really did that much to deserve it. It was a bit of a boring race. So I think the easy one to give away this to is Max, just because of managing what he did through both qualifying and the race.
Kind of. I'm tempted
I'd happily give it to like one of the well-finishing rookies, like Hadjar or someone like that. Hadjar might be a good shout.
But then also, Hadjar is one of the only people who lost a place on track by being overtaken.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe this time we'll just give it to the winner, I think, because it's a weird race to try and award things to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. What about move of the day? As far as I can tell, there's basically two to choose from.
I was about to say, what moves?
So there was the move where Hamilton got Hadjar into turn one during the first stint, which was a pretty standard up the inside of turn one move. There was also signs on Hulkenberg. I think on the first lap he got him into the hairpin. I think that's the one for me, because it's the best of the two that I remember.
I mean, we did have... I'll bring it up because it's not really proper inbox, so to speak, but we did have a message coming from Dog Queen just saying move of the weekend, as it got expanded out to, I think, was Max getting pole on the Saturday.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, there's an argument for that. Like, it's that braking manoeuvre into the final chicane, maybe, from Max. But, out of the two overtakes, maybe Sainz on Hulk in a hairpin.
It was definitely
the best. I think out of those two that we're
Yeah.
talking about. So, maybe give it that.
And then final awards.
Honestly, what the f*** are we doing here?
I mean, there's kind of everything we've just discussed around Doohan's crash and the circumstances around that. Paul in the chat has just mentioned Stroll, which actually I forgot to mention. He was the only driver who was lapped that race.
He was.
He was so slow
so
all weekend.
bad. Yeah.
I feel like every time he has a good race and we praise him, he follows it up with an absolute shocker every single time.
Yeah, like the last couple of races, he's finished in the points and looked okay. Like, very anonymous, but got a job done. And then this weekend, it's just like trundling around at the back.
Abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. He qualified last. He was like half a second behind Doohan. And then, last in the race, the only person lapped. Just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. We should also mention Carlos Sainz at this point, who was fined €20,000, half of which is suspended, for being late to the national anthem. Because he had a bad stomach. And...
This is another one of those really annoying FOM and FIA rules that I absolutely hate. Like... This is as bad as, like, the classic, Kimi, you missed the presentation by Pele.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was taking a...
Yeah.
Like, just let them be people. Let them be human beings with bodily functions.
The worst part of this is the guideline fine for being late to the national anthem or missing it, I think is like 52k. And the FIA said, "Oh no, because a doctor confirmed that he was ill, we'll only fine him €20,000." Like, give the guy a break. Like, would you, under the circumstances he was in, without going into too much gruesome detail, would you rather he was stood there during the national anthem? Probably not.
I hope he cleans up whatever incident he had with the money he pays his fine with.
Delivers it straight to the
whichever
FIA
end it
president's
came
office.
from. Clean it up with 20 grand in euros, and then just give him that.
Direct to
here you are.
the desk of the president.
I would be a nightmare if I was ever a good enough driver to feel that grid, because that is the kind of stunt I would pull. Is like, what's that? You wanted 20 grand for me having my head or my rear end stuck on toilet? Well, here you go. It's
Malicious
covered in
compliance. We should also mention the fact that during practice, and I think in qualifying as well, the circuit was just catching fire every 5 minutes. Like, what was that all about?
I think it was FP2. It was FP2. You had a Doohan's crash, and then after Doohan's crash, I think you had the fire catch circuit 3 times. There were like four red flags in that session, and one was Doohan's crash, and then the remaining ones were the circuit being on fire. And at one point, out of a whole hours-long session or whatever it is, Gasly had done 10 laps and was the leading car in terms of laps completed because of how many red flags there were from fire. It's just crazy.
Pinnacle of motorsport, people. Like, come on.
I think the only reason we got through quality in the race is because we'd had bits of rain and stuff overnight.
Thankfully.
And it dampened things down.
Bizarre.
Yeah. Crazy.
I think it's probably the signs thing for me, because it's just like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, definitely.
What are you doing?
What are we doing with that?
Should we quickly go through predictions before we have a little chat about Bahrain?
Yeah, let's. So I will run us through predictions in general. A bit of a tough weekend for most. I don't think anyone expected Max to be able to do what he did. I mean, a handful of people did, but I think out of a good 200-300 people who entered, about only 3 of them had Max for a pole. So some very good insight, probably last minute submissions, but or just blind faith in Max. But yeah, either way, congrats to those people. Our highest scorers, though, anyone that did score significant points, they all scored 2. So I'll quickly run a list of names. If you hear your name here, you scored 2, which means you're joint high scorers this week. That's Michael L., Jason Suter, Paul Cleary, Stuart Moncrief, Hayden Daly, and Dick Carlson. I mentioned Jason Suter in that. Those 2 points helped take Jason to the top of the board overall with 5 points total. So Jason is now our overall leader. Quick stop over into the official F1 fantasy game. The 12th team is our winner this week with 195 points. But Northern Ballamore still leads overall with 675 points. And then over in our grid rival fantasy, Resort Crabs is the winner this week with 977 points. But Krusty Onion, what are the names in Grid Rival? I don't know if these are auto-generated names by Grid Rival. You know, you just get like
a
random name, like Resort Crabs and Krusty Onion. I don't know. Anyway, Krusty Onion is the leader overall with 3,104 points. So that is that. If you want to get involved in predictions, we'll explain a little bit more in a moment when we do our Bahrain predictions. But if you want to start looking at it while you're listening to the next section, head to backofthegrid.com and start finding out more about it there.
Right. Quick little intro into Bahrain. A few storylines to keep an eye on this weekend. I mean, will McLaren be back on top, or is Verstappen going to be able to keep himself in the mix? Like, this track should very much suit McLaren and all the strengths of their car. The potential's there for this to be a bit of a crash back down to earth for Red Bull after they basically nailed it in Suzuka. But he's already proven that it's just, you can never write him off.
I still think he'll be there or thereabouts. I don't think he'll be far off. I mean, Bahrain, and maybe expect Mercedes and Ferrari to be a bit close to McLaren, so it might be harder for Max, but I could definitely see him being in amongst it all, for sure. I can't see him being that far off the pace.
I sort of feel like we had for like a number of years, every race was basically some order of Ham, Vot, Burr every race. Now, Ham, Vot,
Bot, Ver. Yeah.
I feel like this season's going to be a bit of a Nor, Pia, Ver, every single race in whatever order.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, will we get a fourth winner in 4 races? With 3 for 3 so far. Is there anyone else outside of those 3 that could nick one?
I don't know if they will, but I think given current form and previous form, I'm gonna say Charles Leclerc. If we are gonna get a fourth winner in 4 races, I'm gonna guess it'll be Charles. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't really know how realistic it is for him to beat the McLarens without something maybe going wrong for the McLarens in some way. But yeah, if I was to put if there was like a race without the McLarens, like what we used to get. Do you remember, like in all the betting markets, there was a time where you'd get the race without Mercedes, and then it was the race without Red Bull.
Yeah.
If there was now the race without McLaren, my guess would be Leclerc's leading that. But that's just based on Ferrari and Leclerc previous at Bahrain, I think, and the fact that allegedly they feel like they've gotten to the bottom of issues that they had.
I wouldn't write off Russell as well to pick up a win
true.
at some point. Like, he has a habit of just like grabbing a win every now and again, even when he's not really got the car for it in the last couple of years. So, not impossible. And then finally, Tsunoda. Like, will he actually be able to show the pace that it looked like he had on a track that he should be able to make progress even if he doesn't qualify well?
Yeah, I think he immediately looked a bit more comfortable in the Red Bull than Lawson ever did, for sure. I think there's a definite improvement in terms of his demeanour in the car and what he was able to do with it. So I think he'll do all right. I'm maybe scraping a point or 2 or something like that. I can't imagine him doing anything crazy world beating with it, but it's really going to depend on where it is from a setup perspective, I guess. Like, if Max is genuinely battling for a podium again, I would expect Yuki to be able to pick up a point or 2. If Max is struggling to beat the Ferraris and or the Mercs, then I would say that Yuki might struggle for points. Because in the grand scheme of things this season, I'm going to say that Yuki's going to be 5 or 6 places behind wherever Max is.
Yeah.
Once he's comfortable, I think even when he's comfortable in the car, that's where he's going to end up being. But that's just based on what we've seen in recent years of what a second driver can manage in the Red Bull, I guess. So
I think back end of the points would be good progress for him, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Shall we make some predictions?
Yes. So, being a back-to-back weekend, you've heard this talked about twice. We've already gone through the results from last weekend. We're now going to do the predictions for Bahrain. And then we'll go through this whole process again next week when we do Bahrain results and Saudi Arabia predictions. It's a very intense part of the season, to say the least. But yeah, basically what we're going to do is Chris and I are going to predict the fastest person in Q3, a race winner, the first person to DNF, the number of finishers, and the finishing position of a random driver, which we will draw in a moment. You could join in with this if you want to. Just head to backofthegrid.com. Even if you've never played before, it is worth doing, because if somehow you can manage a perfect 5 out of 5 week, which I don't know how easy that's going to be this season, despite how easy you'd think it should be. Our leader has 5 points total across 3 races, so you will definitely be achieving something if you get a perfect weekend. But if you do, all things aside, you do win a prize. So be sure to go on there, register and join in, even if you've not been with us for the season so far. That being said, let's circle back and say, Chris, who do you think will be fastest in Q3?
I think we're going to be back to McLaren being out at the front this weekend, so I'm going to go with Norris.
Okay. I'm inclined to say it's probably going to be a McLaren as well, because generally they have been up there at every circuit and they've been able to get something out of every circuit. I can't see the Red Bull being as fast as it was in Japan here. So I'm going to say Norris the same as you. The race window becomes difficult and tricky because I feel like things might get a little bit mixed up and a little bit spicy. So I'm just going to go really, really left field and say... I'm going to go with what I said before, actually. I'm going to say Leclerc's going to win the race somehow. I'm just going to go with it. Why not?
4. I'm going to be really boring and say Norris.
Okay. I know I've just lost some points there. Who do you think is going to be the first DNF, Chris?
I'm going to say nobody.
Ooh, you're going for a 20 out of 20.
I'm going to go for back-to-back 20 out of 20.
We have had that once before, have we not? We had a season where there were like 3 or 4. I'm sure there were like 3 or 4 races where nobody DNF'd, and I'm sure 2 of them were back to back. Like
a couple of years ago,
2022 maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so does that mean you're going with 20 finish as well? Yeah,
I am going with 20 finish.
You're not hedging your bets or anything.
Nope.
You're money mouthing. Right. Okay, that means I have to think about this. I'm going to say, from one bad weekend to a next, I'm sorry to do this, Jack, because I do like you generally, but I'm going to say Doohan.
How could you?
It's all going to start coming unravelled for the poor guy. And I'm going to say he'll be the only one, because I'm a bit like you. Historically, we don't have too many DNFs at Bahrain, generally speaking. There's a lot of runoff. I mean, I think it is a... his name's escaping me. This is cloudy, not very well head. What's his name? The circuit designer we talk about him all the time.
Tilke,
yeah. This is a Tilke track, I think, isn't it? With all the glorious runoff everywhere. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to crash into too much. Or, I mean, I say that and think about what happened to Roman Grosjean, but...
Yeah, it takes a lot, though.
Well, yeah, true. So, yeah, I'm going to say 19. And then random driver, I'm going to switch over to the site and see who it is. It is... I'm in the wrong page. That's a good start. It is... Oh, Charles Leclerc. Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
Oh, what do I do? What do I do? Oh, no. Right. You tell me what you're going to do first.
4th.
Oh,
Easy.
If I'd have not had this weird epiphany during the podcast and started hypothesizing that he might come first, I would have genuinely put him 4th. I'm gonna hedge my bets because I think the race win for Leclerc is a long shot. So I'm gonna hedge my bets and say 4th with you. And I think that's his true finishing position. But I just think if something goes wrong up front with the McLarens, Leclerc's going to be there to pounce.
You're going to be gutted if he does win now.
I know, but I just don't know how realistic that was. I'm gutted he's come out. I've talked myself into the fact that he could win, and then, I'm not happy about that. Oh well, there it is. That's our predictions. As I've already said, head to backofthegrid.com if you want to get involved. Can play if you've not played before, just register. There's also links on there to the fantasy leagues if you want to get involved with them. And all the information about like how Predictions League work is on there as well if you want clarifications on any of the bits we just talked about. Right, let's round out with a couple of little bits of inbox.
Keep me saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey man.
First this week from Benson, who says, "Hey man, do you think Pirelli made a mistake by bringing 3 hardest tyre compounds to Suzuka, despite a large proportion of the track being resurfaced? Could they have bought softer compounds and forced a 2-stop race to make it possibly more entertaining?"
I mean, I touched on this a little bit earlier, didn't I? If I'd have realised it was the inbox, I'd have maybe saved it. I guess if they brought the same compound they've always brought, like we were talking about before, there's not really much. It might make them change their mind on the compounds for future years, I guess.
Yeah.
Because of this race. But I think if they'd already set the compounds and what's happened has happened, and they basically use the same compounds they always use, it's probably going to be one of those that they'll maybe reassess for future years. And it should hopefully, at least if they do move them a step down for next year, it might bring that that more guaranteed to stop into play and maybe make things more interesting. But I guess next year we've got a whole different set of cars anyway, so it might not even make a difference regardless.
New cars, new tyres, new everything. Because like Pirelli have to make the tyre choices quite a lot in advance.
Yeah.
I don't know when they would have found out that Suzuka was resurfacing, so they may have made that choice before knowing that. And even if they did know, like, maybe they just wanted to play it safe by taking the harder compounds versus taking soft compounds there that end up falling apart, and you end up with a situation where, you know, like we had in Qatar a year or two ago, where there was like mandated pit stop after a certain number of laps because they were worried about the integrity of the tyres. So I guess given the changes, they were maybe playing safe slightly. But yeah, like in the future, I definitely think they need to lean softer. I think they do in general, to be honest.
Yeah, McGuy's made a decent point in the chat as well. The fact that we had the rain that morning meant the track and the general temperature was a lot cooler than it probably would have been, and it had been over the last few days. So there's an element of that as well. I think it's like almost just a perfect storm for good tyre wear, basically. A perfect storm of events. So yeah, right. And then speaking of McGuy, his question is next. A year or two ago, you could argue that any of Verstappen, Hamilton, or Alonso were the most gifted drivers on the grid. However, following Alonso's post-qualifying... I've talked about this already as well. Following Alonso's post-qualifying comments to the media, are we now seeing Max entering an uncharted GOAT territory if he can retain this year's World Drivers' Championship title in an inferior car for the second year running?
It's really interesting to hear someone like Alonso say that. Because Alonso has always been one of the more bullish, sure of himself, sure of his abilities. I am the best out there, regardless of what the results are. So for him to say that was Max doing Max things, he's like elevated, which is quite surprising.
It's a pretty high stamp of approval, isn't it? Let's put it that way.
Oh, very much so.
And I don't know if it was specifically related to this, but the thing that McGuy is talking about, if you haven't seen it, is worth just like giving it a quick look up on YouTube and checking it out. But Alonso is like literally beaming. Now, whether it's related to seeing that lap go in and seeing that happen, and that's why they're talking about it, I don't know. But he's like, I haven't seen Alonso look that happy in ages. And if it's a reaction to seeing a stellar lap going, that just shows like how much it impressed him for him to like genuinely be reacting like that, if that is what he was reacted to. But yeah, I agree with the comments, to be fair. I don't necessarily agree so much with McGuy on the end of this saying an inferior car for the second year running, because that car was definitely the best car on the grid for at least the first third of the season.
Yeah, year and a half maybe.
But regardless, like he still saw out the title despite it not being the best car by the end of the season. Let's put it that way.
And look, I think even if he never wins another championship, like after he's retired and the best F1 drivers of all time conversations are happening, his name is already in that conversation regardless. Like
100%.
Winning another one this year in an inferior car would only cement that. But yeah, love it or hate it, he's already in that conversation for sure.
Yep, agreed.
And that is about everything. Somehow we've managed to do well over an hour on that race where basically two things happened for the entire race. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully lots of you have, because it's very interesting to see how the listing figures rise and fall with the quality of races. But we thank you all for joining us. We'll be back in a week's time to review the Bahrain Grand Prix. It is just non-stop at the moment, so here's to it being a more interesting one, hopefully. If you want to get in touch with us in the meantime, backofthegrid.com. You can contact us there or find links to all the various social media things. You can also sign up there for the Predictions League if you've not already, and enter your predictions. They are open now, so you have until the beginning of Q1 to enter your predictions. And it's a normal weekend again, so you actually can... Actually, for the first time for European viewers, it's going to be a race at a normal time, so you have a bit more time to work out your predictions. But yeah, I think that's everything. So we will be back in a week's time. Thank you all for joining us, and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.